Welcome to another episode of Her Mentor podcast. Super excited about this week's episode for many reasons. This week, I sat down with Jessica O'Kane, and I'm so excited about this episode for many reasons. First off, a bit of background around Jess. She has a background in marketing and sales, had a career in marketing and sales, and then hit a point where she realized that maybe there was a different avenue that would make more sense for her and her skills and her passions, and pursued a career as a coach. So she now works as a coach and is really helping women in particular. She also works with some men, but works with a lot of women to help them understand their purpose. And a lot of those women, coincidentally, have corporate careers, sometimes in sales, sometimes not. But that's a bit about Jessica's background. She is also based in Canada, East Coast of Canada. And before we jump into things, want to give a little bit of context around my relationship with Jessica. So my relationship with Jessica started in 2019 when we were both working at the same tech company, worked together in different capacities, but eventually ended up in a role where Jessica was my manager, which was really fun because a lot of our one-to-ones were essentially coaching sessions because of the fact that I was in a position where I was doing really well, and it was more conversations around life. And then over time, as we've both left and had different, career pivots, I guess, we have ended up still being in each other's lives through just that experience together, but also because I am one of Jess's clients. She's my coach. So this episode might look a little bit different than some previous episodes because of the fact that Jess has a lot of insight on different areas that I know a lot of women in sales struggle with. So wanted to have the conversation, of course, talk about her experience and how she ended up where she is now, because I think there is a really interesting element of going from salesperson to business owner, and that there is a lot of pieces that make sense together there. But really wanted to put an emphasis around pulling out some of that wisdom that she has for women in this space, since I know a lot of what she has taught me and what I've learned through working with her in different capacities has been really helpful in my career. So that is what a lot of this conversation is going to be geared around. And forewarning, it is a bit of a longer episode than usual because Jess and I both love to yap. So super excited to share this episode with you all. I'm going to hand it over to Jess and myself. Jess, I'm so excited to have you here. I know in the intro I just gave, folks have a little bit of a background of who you are and kind of the big role that you played in my life, from being my manager or an AE that I worked with first, then a manager that I worked with, then just a friend mentor in my life that lived around the corner, and now as my coach. So I'm so excited to have you here because you've given me a lot of wisdom, and I know that the folks listening to this are going to get a lot of wisdom from you. But I would love for you to kind of have a little bit of space to introduce yourself as well.
Thanks, Cal. I'm so excited to be here, especially to have watched you on your journey and to see what you've created with this podcast. I'm so incredibly proud of you. I have a hard time saying proud because sometimes I feel like it implies like a hierarchy, like I'm looking down, but that's not it. So I can't think of the appropriate word. Just you inspire me so much. So thank you for having me on this podcast.
I'm so excited.
Yeah, me too. I think this is going to be a great conversation. Yeah, so a little introduction. I think of myself as a corporate dropout. I think of myself as a corporate dropout, but like in the most empowered way. So I had a 10-year career in marketing and sales. So I pivoted from marketing into sales and then progressed into sales management, which I loved. And I kept thinking after every promotion and every career milestone that, okay, this is when I'm going to feel fulfilled and this is when I'm going to feel satisfied. And I thought sales management, like being a guide and a mentor to a team, was going to be like the thing that made me so happy. And then I got there and I was like, oh, like this is still not it.
Yeah.
And so I thought that was a me thing that would be fixed. And when I got the thing that I so desired and realized it wasn't fixed, I was like, okay, it's not, I realize it's not a job thing. Like this is a me thing. And I needed to go inward. And that's when I hired my very first coach. And in doing that, and doing a lot of self-discovery and inner alignment work, I realized that I was really living a life and working in a career that was very misaligned with who I am at my core.
Mm.
And so that led me to making some big shifts. I left my corporate job with no plan. I think I knew that I wanted to go full-time in coaching. In fact, I was looking back at old journal entries. I did know. I was journaling about it like a year before. Like I was journaling about the dream, but I never took the dream seriously. Anyway, fast forward a few months after I left my corporate job and I went full-time in my coaching business and have never looked back. So that's a little bit about my professional introduction. And then, as a human, I live on the East Coast of Canada. I still struggle with winters a little bit.
We all do.
I am a certified yoga teacher. That's fairly recent for me. I'm super passionate about meditation, mindfulness, and yoga and philosophy. I'm a total nerd. I read. I usually have 3 or 4 books on the go. I love dancing like an idiot so that's just a little bit about me. Yeah.
I love that intro because it captures all sides of you, not just the professional side, which I think is so important that we exist as people outside of just work. Get into kind of what you're doing now because I think that sales is still a big part of that.
I didn't even talk about that. Like, what
For context, Jess, you're a purpose coach now.
I am a purpose coach.
A business owner as well.
Yeah.
And with that, I'm sure there's still a lot of sales that's happening.
Oh,
but
so much. Yeah.
I want to understand, like, how did you end up in marketing and sales in the first place? And the reason why is because I personally know that you started out like thinking that you were going to go to med school, maybe. So I'm curious how that shift happened.
Yeah, I love this question because I had this stereotype thinking about sales that like sales was cringy and that it was something I never pictured myself doing. And it's so funny because I've basically been doing sales my entire life. Like through high school and university, I always worked in the service industry, serving, bartending, managing. And when you're serving and bartending, you're literally selling, like building relationships, upselling, like getting people to come back. And it completely bypassed for me that I was already kind of in sales. And so when I was younger, I thought I knew exactly what I wanted to be when I grew up. I wanted to be a doctor. I wanted to make the world a better place. And when I was growing up, it was the very typical, you either become a lawyer, a doctor, or a freaking dentist or something, It was like the very stereotypical career goals. And so when I thought to myself, I want to make the world a better place, I thought, okay, doctor is the way to do that. Or get super famous and make a shit ton of money and solve world hunger. So doctor it was. And I did a science degree, and through university, I did an undergraduate in chemistry. So you're like already, you can see like the pivot was a very odd one. So I did my undergrad in chemistry, and throughout those 4 years, I learned that I was burnout prone and I don't like blood. So probably not the best candidate for medicine. And that was a really hard realization for me because I thought that I had like my whole life and career planned out, like go to med school and med school is a big commitment, right? Go to med school, become a doctor, pay off the debt, and then like have a great life, whatever. That whole vision for myself vanished, and it felt like a rug had been pulled from under me. I had no idea, like, okay, well, what am I going to do now? And a mentor of mine at the time, he was actually a chemistry PhD student, and he was supporting me in my thesis. And he was like, Jess, the world probably needs more science and business, like business-minded human, like people that are good with other people in the science industry. It's a really niche combination. You should do an MBA. And when he said that, my response was like, yeah, obviously. Why did I not think of that earlier? And it's funny now because I know my human design, and I'm a manifesting generator, and my strategy is to respond. So I really just needed to hear the different options for my sacral to be able to say, yes, like that is the thing. And I remember feeling like, yeah, that is the thing. So obviously. So I immediately like went on my computer and I was like, okay, when can I apply? I wrote my GMAT. I got into an MBA program in my hometown of Windsor, Ontario. They have an excellent business school. And so I did that. And I thought for sure I would be a finance or accounting girly because of the science background. And I ended up falling in love with marketing because I've also always been an artist. I've always been a very creative human. And so really not that surprised that I ended up falling for marketing. But still at this point, sales to me was like, ugh. So after my MBA, I actually did a semester abroad. And this is where like I started doing things that I've always wanted to do, but I had kind of like always been making excuses that I needed to stick with the linear path. And so I had always wanted to go to Europe. And so I had the opportunity to do a semester abroad, and I lived in France for 4 months, traveled Europe, like totally got infected with the travel bug, and obviously spent most of my savings on Europe. And I absolutely loved living in France. I went to Paris so many times. Paris is like my favorite city. So I came home, graduated from my MBA, broke, and I had a concentration in marketing. And so I took a job again in my hometown, Windsor, Ontario, which is right across from Detroit, Michigan. So big automotive town. And so my first big girl job was as a marketing manager for a manufacturing company. And I worked there for 2 years. I got bored, obviously. I was like, okay, what's next? And I couldn't shake this daydream of going to Africa and working in Africa. And I had gone to Africa on holiday. I did a safari in South Africa for 2 weeks with my like romantic partner at the time, someone that I met when I was in Europe. And again, was infected with something. And I'll never forget something that the host that I was staying with told me. I love this woman, Sue. Sue, if you're ever listening to this, sending lots of love. Sue was like, yeah, once you get Africa in your blood, you can't get rid of it. You're going to want to come back. And so here I was 2 years into a job that I was kind of like, okay, a little bit mind numbing. And I was daydreaming about going to Africa. And so I would literally Google Africa marketing because I didn't just want to go and like volunteer. I love the idea of volunteering, but I wanted to serve a bigger purpose. I wanted to share my skill set and my gifts while also like building my experience because I was very career driven at this time. Okay. And so I came across this opportunity. Literally, it was a 3-month contract as a marketing advisor in Africa. Amazing. Perfect. Like interviewed for it, got it, went. Didn't even like tell anyone about my plans. I got the job, or the position rather, because it was a contract. I told my family like, I'm moving out of my apartment and going to Africa, by the way. I'm like, what? Like, what's she up to? This is the most classic Jess thing. Honestly, this is when they started to realize like, oh, she's fully unhinged. Like we can't control her. So, I lived and worked in Ghana, in northern Ghana for 3 months. It was it was a very pivotal moment for me. I felt more like myself than I really ever had. And I got to work with local entrepreneurs. Basically, my mandate was to work with entrepreneurs under 30, so youth,
Yeah.
in helping them put together a solid business plan and advising on their marketing strategies. And it was just, it was amazing. So I came home from that contract and got a job on the east coast of Canada, which is very far from Windsor, Ontario, for anyone who doesn't know Canada's geography. This was a marketing manager role for a multi-billion-dollar global seafood company, which is interesting because I had the service background.
Yeah.
And did that for 2 years. That was fun, but also it's like a clock. It's like a circadian rhythm inside of me. At the end of 2 years, I'm bored. I'm done. It's time to go. And also, where I was a very small town on the East Coast, which for someone who loves like travel and big experiences felt a little bit constricting. And I also met who is now my husband at the time. So we met. We worked at the same company together, different departments, different floors kind of situation. And in him, who is now my husband, in this person, this human, in him, I found like a twin flame. I really felt like, okay, we were very aligned with our bigger dreams and our goals. And so we decided to move to the bigger city on the east coast of Canada, which is Halifax. Still not a big city, a great city, but not a huge city.
Yeah.
And that's where I was so determined to move. And we had set our sights on Halifax, and I was looking for jobs. And there were very little marketing opportunities that were like exciting. There's a lot of marketing roles that were like marketing for a toy company. It's just like I was done working for companies that I wasn't interested in. Like I wanted to feel alive again.
Yeah.
And so I came across this role at this social media analytics company that was like really up and coming. Yeah. And they were working with some very cool brands. And the only posting they had up was for account executive, so a sales role. And I remember applying to the role, and in my cover letter, I was like, I'm not interested in the account executive role, but if you have a market, like an opening on your marketing team, I'd be very interested. And I presented myself in that way. And the director of sales at the time reached out to me and she's like, I know you're interested in marketing, but we see a big opportunity here because of your background in marketing, and you would be essentially selling to marketers. So I think this could be really fun for you. And I was like, yeah, I think you're right. It would be really fun. And so that's how I ended up in sales. Like, we're talking about me thinking sales was like, first of all, I didn't sell my soul. I was like, yeah, the money sounds great, but like, I don't want to be constantly, I already said I'm burnout prone, right? I don't want to be constantly hustling and like being like cold calling and shit like that. All of that was just like, ugh. But there was something about this opportunity. And I jived with the director of sales at the time, and I was really craving mentorship. And I was like, you know what? This is an opportunity to learn a whole new skill set. So, and that's what I'm craving. So I'm going to go for it. It's so funny. I almost didn't get the job because I bombed the mock discovery call.
Really?
Because I was such a marketer. And like, I'd be asking questions, like I'd be going deep into their strategy. And then the director of sales, who's on the other side of the mock call, is like, so when are you going to sell me? Anyway, she saw something in me, which I'm so grateful, because this was another turning point in my life. And I remember she called me and she was like, so I can't offer you the job based on that mock call, but I see something in you. And if you're willing to take some feedback and come back and do it again, and there's a significant, improvement in your performance, then I'll know that you're open to coaching and like that you're ready for this. And so I studied. I downloaded all the free resources from HubSpot and Salesforce. What the fuck is BANT? What does it mean to qualify a deal? Like, because again, I was so marketing minded. And I even like became an inbound lead for HubSpot and took like I was a lead for them to watch how that person led the call. So
Oh my
like
gosh.
I was so
You
committed
were
at this point.
invested.
I was very invested. I don't know what it was. Something switched, like a switch went off, and I was just like, I really want this job. And so I did very well on a second
You got the
attempt,
job.
and I got the job. And yeah, it was a tough transition. It was fun, but it was tough. But within the first year, because of my very like, I'm very focused. When I want something, I will not give up until I have it. And so the first few months, yeah, they were tough. But I was determined to prove myself. And I remember becoming like the top performing AE within a year and doubling my quota. And everyone was like, whoa, like, okay, wow, this chick means business. And just within that 1 year, I was like, okay, this was a lot of fun, but I'm so burnt out right now. Like
Yeah.
so burnt out. And I was like, oh my God, what am I gonna do? And that's when I was like, I think I want to be a manager because I was a marketing manager before, but I wasn't managing people. I was managing strategy and managing agencies.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to manage people. And so I made that desire known and I stayed in the AE role and I focused on performance and really tried to lean into like having conversations with like SDRs like yourself and people in other departments just to kind of be open and available to organic mentorship because that's what I was craving. And then an opportunity to be a manager on the sales development team came up. And that was, again, I was so excited for that opportunity. And, when you get that new job that you're actually excited for, it's like you become a new version of yourself. Like, oh my God, this is what it's like to wake up excited for your job. And that's what it felt like for the first little bit, of course, right?
Yeah.
And then again, within 2 years, like fucking clockwork, excuse my language, I was bored again. What is this pattern? Yeah. And so that's my long ass winded little story to tell you how I stumbled into sales. And just to add one final piece, because you suggested this and you're 100% right. When you start your own business, oh my God, it's a whole different sales game. You're selling yourself. And you know this as you're starting your own business. And I thought that I knew everything there was to know about sales. Hell, I hit 200% of my quota. My team was always the top performing team. I know about sales. Here I am in coaching or building my coaching business. I'm like, oh my God, I know nothing. Because I'm working with a mentor at the time and I'm learning like, holy shit, if I had known all of this when I was in sales, I would have tripled my quota.
It's a whole different beast selling yourself to versus selling somebody else's product or like somebody else's service versus selling something that is essentially yourself. Like you're my coach. A big part of the reason why people pick to work with you is because it's you, not like it's not the same, I guess, as when you're selling a product. In some ways it's a bit it's even more intimidating, I guess, is my experience so far.
Much.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like selling yourself is one thing. I think people are innately, especially people in sales or marketing, are innately good at selling themselves. Like you can perform in an interview, right? You're an excellent interviewer. That is selling yourself. When you know what you want and you are positioning yourself for a role, that's selling yourself. But it's when all of a sudden you are selling your expertise or selling a service that requires your confidence and your backing of yourself. And when you're actually receiving money for that specifically, rather than like being able to hide behind a corporate paycheck, right?
Yep.
That's when shit gets real. And like, it's a whole different level of selling yourself. Like,
Totally. Because it sounds like at one point in that story of even writing your cover letter to that company, being like, I don't want to be a salesperson here. I want to be a marketing person here. Sounds like you might have accidentally sold yourself as a good salesperson in that cover letter.
I think that's what happened.
Shit, not what I wanted. It worked out, but
Yeah, it did, because working in sales, oh my God, it allowed me to eliminate so much debt.
yeah.
Like, yeah, it I was in debt. I remember always being stressed about money. And I was
Mhm.
very stubborn about being like what's the word I'm looking for? Self-sustained, or
Yeah.
the word is escaping me, but you know what I'm saying. And not only was I able to wipe out debt, I was able to accumulate 6 figures in savings. I had
Yeah.
never experienced that amount of money in my bank account, or in my RS, like retirement savings accounts, etc. And it's so interesting because, again, I thought that that would be the solution to my scarcity problem, my scarcity
Mhm.
mindset, my stress around money. And I'd never been more stressed than when I had all of that money. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
yet I realized, like, oh, there's some inner shit that needs to happen there. But sales was amazing in so many ways. One of the ways was, yeah, like really experiencing financial abundance for the first time.
Sounds like, okay, there's lots of money in my bank account and I'm still not feeling this
Yeah.
sense of fulfillment that I want to feel. Maybe
Mm,
money isn't the problem. So, as much as it didn't eliminate that, it actually probably did give you some space to dig deeper versus when you're just like trying to make sure that all of your bills are paid. It's not as easy to do the harder work because there's all these other things of like, I want to make sure that like my power bill is paid so that my power doesn't get cut. So there is that freedom that it gives you to be able to even realize like, okay, there is something else deeper to figure out here.
yeah.
Which kind of brings me to just like talking through some of the common struggles that women in sales seem to face
Mm,
all the time. And I know they're a part of my experience in sales. I think
mm,
that they're part of some of your story in sales, but in general, it seems like women in sales roles and men too, but once again, female audience, and I do think that some of these are more common amongst women than men, but
mm.
just like that self-doubt, the burnout, like figuring out what work-life balance even looks like. It sounds like your first few months, at least in sales, was just like working
Oh
super
yeah.
hard
Try
all the time.
years. Yeah.
Yeah. Trying not to burn yourself out, having that element of self-doubt maybe, and then
Mm,
dealing with some imposter syndrome. So kind of want to like move the convo over there a little bit and just like understand how all of those challenges played a role in your journey and like I guess if they actually did, I think they did based on you nodding
yeah.
your head. Yes, but
Yeah. I mean, what you said about these being pain points that you've noticed, observed in women more than men, there's a reason for that. And it really
mhm,
comes back to conditioning and how we carry generational wounds and trauma, as men do, but very different generational wounds and trauma. Like,
yeah,
men have the whole, like, I can't ever express my emotions thing, right? Like, yes, women have that to a point, but for us, it's a lot safer to express our emotions when we're, in the presence of other women.
mhm,
So there are very different, like, experiences conditioning wise. And I learned a lot about this through, like, my deep excavation and foray into mindset work. I was always interested in that stuff, but
yeah,
because I was so focused on driving my career forward, it's like I only ever really scratched the surface. And now in my coaching practice, it's like this is the root of what I do. So yeah, like the whole, you know, generational wound of women needing to, like, prove ourselves and claw our way to a seat at the table, that goes generations back.
mm,
And the wild thing is, if you go all the way back, there is a point where women were in the seat of power, and, like, where men realized what they could do to manipulate the power out of women and take control of it. That's a
mm.
whole nother story. But yeah, the main challenges, I love what you described because it's from your experience and it's from the conversations you've had. And it really aligns with what I see too. Like the main um, four categories of like limiting beliefs or fears are really like fear of other people's opinions, so fear of
Yeah.
judgment, um, the comparison bucket, so constantly comparing ourselves to others, especially as women, um, given that, you know, even 100 years ago, like we were pitted against each other. We still are pitted against each other, really.
Yeah.
Um,
Especially in sales too. It's a natural
Especially in sales.
environment
That
for
is
it.
an interesting one because it's pretty on the nose. It's like you're literally on a leaderboard.
Yep.
Yeah. So fear of other people's opinions, comparison, self doubt is a big one. And then I feel like self doubt and imposter syndrome kind of go hand in hand.
Totally.
Um, yeah. But the wild thing is, these are so widely experienced and felt, but so rarely do we talk about the root of each of those like,
Mm.
fears and each of those challenges. And that's really, those are the bigger conversations that need to be had.
I am interested in the root being even deeper than what I think it's always been for me.
Mm,
Like in my experience, something that I've just been thinking about a lot recently, and this is coming up from conversations that I've had on the podcast,
mm,
honestly, like we had Jill a couple of weeks ago join the podcast and she talked about kind of carving out her own path and just creating her own career path in general, which you don't hear that often from women. I feel like my experience has always been, okay, this is if I like even as a child, you're told like if you're good, Santa will come and give you gifts. If you study hard, you will get good grades. So my perception when I went into the workplace was always like, okay, if I do the like quote unquote good thing, right thing, if I work hard, if I do the right stuff, then the
mm,
opportunities will just like fall into my lap.
mhm.
So that's how I've always thought of it, of just being something that's like pretty point blank of good thing happens, then good thing will come to me. Like that I do good thing, then good thing happens to me. And that
Yeah.
was all. So I'm curious like how much deeper it actually goes than that from your like perspective of a more professional, someone who's actually done some like
Mhm.
work and research and reading around this.
What you just described about do good, receive good is
Yeah.
actually coming from a core like worthiness wound that
Mm.
I'm not deserving or worthy of good as I am, that I
Whoa.
need to perform and that it needs to be a transaction where I give in order to receive.
Yeah.
But actually, that is scarcity thinking, right?
Yeah.
Abundant thinking or an abundant mindset, which by the way, we live in an abundant universe. That's a whole other conversation. But it's really just a shift in perspective that you are worthy simply by being here because the universe, God, source, whatever you believe in, literally put you here.
Mhm.
So by you literally being alive, you are worthy. You are worthy of all of the things you desire. That's a let's scratch all the things you desire because there's a lot of misconceptions there, but you are worthy of goodness, you are worthy of health, you are worthy of health, wealth, prosperity, all of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you see that like that is so much deeper? It's yeah.
It, it feels so much harder to conceptualize though in
I
a
know.
way
I know.
of okay, what does that actually translate to if I am somebody who's doing my job every day? Like, do I just go in and have this open mindset of like, I guess what I'm trying to understand is I'm putting myself back into my shoes before I started doing any of the like inner work and
Mm,
understanding of what even like scarcity versus abundance means. Like
yeah. Yeah.
I think that there's, like, so much to unpack here in
So
some
much.
ways of how you're listening to this podcast and you're like, okay, yes, Jess, there's so much abundance in this world. How the heck do I get promoted to be an AE then?
Right.
Like, I pictured that being
Yeah.
a version of myself listening to this. And I know that there's not like this easy, condensed version. There's a lot of work that goes into understanding and like having these as your core beliefs. But I'm just picturing that version of myself being like, what does that mean?
Yeah, well, I love this because we can simplify it because you did get promoted from SDR to AE. So we can
Yeah,
reverse engineer that and make
totally.
it really simple for the listeners tuning in. But I do want to clarify because again, this is a misconception that so many people latch onto. Worth is not entitlement. They're two very different things, right?
Huge.
Yeah. So a sense of worth is feeling inherently worthy and deserving. That really is like probably what people would identify as like self-confidence, right?
Yeah.
Like knowing that you have something of value to offer the world, knowing that you actually have a very unique gift. So many people are in resistance to those ideas because honestly, that's what capitalism thrives on, making you feel small so that you feel like you have to prove yourself.
Yeah.
Whereas entitlement is almost like it's cockiness, right? Whereas, and we can
Yeah.
see the difference between cockiness and confidence. So I think that's a very important distinction to make
Yep.
is that inherent sense of self-worth is contagious. When you value yourself, you're signaling to others that they should value you as well. If you
Mhm.
don't value yourself, why should others value you? Why should you get an AE promotion if you don't even value yourself? And energy is contagious, right? Like you might present as a confident, like, I've created so much pipeline and blah, blah, blah. But if the actual core in you is there's like a sense of unworthiness, that's coming
Mhm.
through. You still might get the role, but it would
Yeah.
be a hell of a lot easier to achieve your goals if you were anchored in that like deep sense of worth. So I guess it would be really interesting to hear from you. If we were to reverse engineer your promotion from SDR to AE, what did that look like for you?
My path was a bit different than most people's.
Mm,
Um, I was an SDR way longer than a lot of people are SDRs. I moved from one company to another, still SDR role to another SDR role because of the fact I think there's like many factors that played into that. But the first one was a little bit of imposter syndrome because I was either potentially about to be offered a management role or move back to an SDR role. The SDR role was paying more than the management role would have paid. So that was
mm,
a factor too. But there's got to be part of you in the back of your mind that's like, you know, I don't know if I'm ready for this yet. I think I was only like 22 or 23 at that time. Like, am I actually qualified for this? Had been asked during interviews about how old I was. Like, there was that piece happening that
mm,
was in the back of my head. So that was my first like opportunity out that I didn't take and then I went the other path. And then when I actually got promoted to account executive, it kind of was one of those situations of it just like fell in my lap, which is not common at all. We had been acquired by another company. So then the opportunity just presented itself of, okay, because of the fact that we're now owned by this other company, we're getting rid of this department. Everyone is being promoted into this next step. So that's what my path looked like in terms of the first opportunity to potentially get promoted, there was a lot of factors. I think I ran away in some ways, right?
mm.
And then the other opportunity was truly just like fell in my lap.
Do you think you ran away or do you think you actually listened to your intuition? Because you're like the
Yeah,
question, am I qualified versus because I know that you are emotional projector, emotional
yeah,
being your authority,
yeah,
and your strategy is to wait for the invitation. So when you got the invitation to step into management, I think because I witnessed you in this process, I think you thought you should be more excited. You're like, this
yeah,
should be the natural next step. Why am I like I should want this? But
totally.
I think you were really just listening to your intuition, being like,
Yeah,
management's not for you, girl. You don't want
I
it.
didn't want it, but now that I'm more secure in myself, there is parts of me that wonder if different versions of me would have said yes to certain opportunities because I would have felt more confident. But I don't think that that's the only, like,
I think you
I
were
don't think
really
that's the only reason.
connected to your intuition in that situation. You know, sometimes it's easy to hide behind what the mind is saying, which
Mhm.
the mind was saying, am I qualified? But at the end of the day, if your intuition is telling you, Kelly, this is not for you, that am I qualified story could just be the mechanism of the mind to reinforce your intuition, if that makes sense. It doesn't always
Absolutely.
work that way. Yeah.
It also, like, sounds a little bit more socially acceptable in a way to be
I
like, "Oh, I
know.
had this self-doubt," and being like, "No, I was just, like, trusting my gut,"
I
essentially.
know, because the natural thing, the linear path is you are expected to progress from individual contributor to manager. And you were
Yeah,
like, why does this not sit well with me?
yeah,
And like, truth is, Cal, maybe management is, or maybe guiding teams eventually would have been for you. But I think your intuition really knew at that moment. It just wasn't
totally.
for you at that point.
I totally agree. I probably wouldn't even be sitting here right now having this
Yeah.
podcast, running my own business, all of that. So everything worked out. Um, but I didn't even ever think of the fact that it was just my intuition guiding me.
I know. This is the big thing for women too, is that our intuition is so powerful. It
Mm,
is so powerful. And often when you start to do the work to really connect with your intuition,
yeah.
if you look back, you actually see that some of your bigger life decisions that did put you on your path, which is inevitably your path, there's no time that you're not walking your path, but you're like, oh, yeah, wow, my intuition was really right on. Like at that point, it's very easy to look back and be like, oh shit, I didn't even realize that was like, wow, I got this weird nudge. I couldn't make sense of it, right? You couldn't quite make sense of it,
No,
but
yeah,
moved. You moved in an aligned way in that moment, and it felt very uncomfortable for you,
totally.
but you did it anyway. I
I did
remember.
it.
Yeah. And I think the other thing about your story that I'm just, going to reflect back as
Okay.
someone who's now a mentor and a coach is that you didn't make your role mean anything about you.
Mhm.
Like the fact that you were an SDR for longer than a
Yeah.
lot of people are, and maybe you did this. This could be a misread, but I think you didn't make your position mean anything about you, and you went in and you did the best that you could. And I know that you landing in an AE position seems like, yeah, it was just because we got acquired. But the point is, if you weren't ready for it, you would have bombed as an AE and it wouldn't have gone well. But you were ready for it,
It's
and you
true.
knew you were ready for it. So there was an anchored self-confidence and self-belief there. But the point is, you didn't make the role mean anything about you. And I think that's a huge piece. I think that's a huge piece.
I think that that's huge, especially for people in SDR roles, because I know that we're kind of like veering off into a different area now, but as an SDR, it can be really easy, and you've managed SDR teams, so you have a lot of visibility into kind of like some of that mindset. It is constantly the design of the role and the design of companies is kind of to put those people in a position where pretty much from the moment that you start doing like kind of well, even like you hit 1 month, you're like, okay, what's next? Where do I head
Mhm.
next? Am I going to get promoted into a different sales job? Do you want to go to marketing? Do you want to go to customer service? Like, what is next? And it is really easy to feel like, oh, like, should I be sitting here for this long? Is this gonna
Mhm.
look bad? Does this make me not look appealing to other companies? But for me, like, transparently, I was making enough money to feel pretty confident about where I was at in life, like, had a nice
Mhm.
place to live, was able to buy a nice car, um, had all of the, like, financial piece, and then also got to a place where mentally, I didn't really have to work super hard to
Mhm.
do well. So, of course, like, that's pretty awesome too. I'm making money and I'm
Yeah.
not having to work super hard. Like, I might expose myself a little bit by saying this, but when Jess was my manager, I used to take naps during the day sometimes
But
because I
Kel,
figured it out.
human
Um,
design, dude. And I didn't know shit about human design when I was your manager. All I knew is that this girl's crushing it. And I don't know how, I actually don't know how. I used to mine your numbers and your outreach. Be like, how is she doing this? So that I could reproduce it and coach people on it. And I couldn't figure out the through line on what it was that made Kelly Stewart so friggin' efficient and effective at your job. But now, again, with the human design lens, projectors actually they need a lot more rest than 80% of the population who are generators and manifesting generators who have sustained life force and like energy. You get insane amounts of work done in a very condensed amount of time. So you get what normal people would get done in 10 hours in 2.
yeah.
And I kind of intuitively, I saw that. That wasn't even intuitive. I saw it in the numbers. I'm like, I'm not shaming this woman for resting and putting herself first because she's crushing it. And for me as your manager, what was important was to tap into what do you actually want? How can this job be of service to your bigger goals? And that was what most of our one-to-ones were about. They weren't really
Yeah.
about, tell me, what are you doing to hit your numbers? So I was like, if I can't find it in the numbers, like Kelly's not going to be able to articulate it. This is not like, you stood up and you shared a lot in front of teams, in front of the broader team and group meetings and things like that, which was amazing. But really my goal as your manager at the time was to make sure that you were feeling like you were moving forward, because when you're not moving forward, it is the most soul crushing thing. So yeah, again, I was just wanted to reflect back again, because you're a projector and like the workforce is really wired to move like generators and manifesting generators. For anyone listening who doesn't know much about human design, this could be a fun gateway
Yeah.
for you. But basically, human design is the science of differentiation and how energy moves in us uniquely as unique humans. And every one of us is a very unique blueprint. But there are certain elements that can be, we can see trends in the world's population. And, 80% of the world is meant to work because they had the energy for it. Kelly is a projector. I forget the percentage of, maybe it's 10% of the population are projectors. Maybe it's 8. And y'all are here to take in from your environments and then show the way on better ways to do things. But because you're constantly taking other people's energy in, that means you need a lot more time to purge and to rest and to recharge. And you were doing that naturally.
Mhm.
And I think some shame came with that, because you're like, oh, I should be working 8 hours a
Yeah.
day. But you really did crack a code, like, which is so cool in hindsight, don't you think?
It is. And even now, it's interesting as we're talking about this. I'm like, should I have admitted on my podcast that I used to sleep during the workday sometime? It was only like 30 minutes at a time, but still,
But
should
I
I be
think that's
admitting that to
important
people?
for people to know that there is no one size fits all approach to work. And like,
Yeah.
not just sales, but sales is a special case because it does take so much energy. Like, sales does require a lot of output, and it does require
Yes.
someone to be able to like have solid boundaries. And yeah, I think when we bring in the conversation of human design, the matter is we are so different. And like, the 9 to 5 is dying a slow death. Honestly, it's not dying slow enough. I wish it was dying faster. Like, when you think about the 9 to 5, Cal, it
Mhm.
was born out of the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
It was literally built to get the most output out of people on a manufacturing line. 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. In fact, they worked 7 days a week. And then Henry Ford was like, in order to maximize the output from these people, we should give them 2 days off
Oh
so that
my
they do
goodness.
more when they're here. That's how the
Yeah.
weekend was born. So the 9 to 5, how does this still exist in 2025? To be honest, that's like my bigger opinion.
Yeah.
So you finding a way to make the 9 to 5 work for you, that is empowering as fuck. And more people need to hear that working 8 hours a day is like, who cares? If you're getting your work done, you're excelling, and you're finding ways to feel engaged and energized, and you feel like you're moving forward, amazing. Take a fucking nap, you know? Anyway.
Yeah. I'm glad that you brought up the 9 to 5 stuff, because that is something I wanted to talk through and like get an opinion from you on, because of the fact that I know where you stand on the 9 to 5. Like, this is not the first time I've ever heard you say that the 9 to 5 should be dead, essentially, and that there's better ways and a new way of doing things. But once again, like, audience is probably going to be a lot of people who are in a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Maybe they really like the work that they're doing, but the structure just is like slowly killing them inside. Or maybe there's something feeling a little bit misaligned there. So I'm curious if, somebody's listening to this, they're in a 9 to 5 job right now. They do feel fulfilled and in alignment with the work that they're doing. How can they kind of navigate that 9 to 5 and like thrive or survive? I don't want to just say like survive, but essentially like survive in this area that is set up, this system that's probably unfortunately not going anywhere anytime super soon.
Yeah.
What would your kind of recommendation be to someone who's kind of having to be forced to be in that environment and maybe doesn't have a manager like I had, who like probably knew I was not working my entire 9 to 5 every day, but I was still hitting my numbers, so she didn't care? Because I think that there's some managers that would be like, well, if she's only working 4 hours of the day and she's supposed to be working 8, she could actually be hitting double what she's currently hitting. So I guess just like,
I knew that wouldn't be possible. I knew it would be a point of diminishing returns.
absolutely. But I think that there's some managers out there who are like,
I know.
work harder.
I know. That's where the human aspect needs to be like anchored in way deeper in the corporate world. So like I said, I think it's moving slow. I wish it was moving faster. But the truth of the matter is there is huge value in getting experience in a 9 to 5 setting, because it's like your playground. You get to figure out what you like, what you don't like, what you're really good at. You get exposed to so many different, people and projects and blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of good things that can come out of a 9 to 5. However, you need to have the right perspective. And I think the question you just asked is, how do you shift from surviving to thriving in a 9 to 5?
Totally.
Yeah. And, I think this is where it's really easy to fall for the surface level hacks, like productivity hacks and self-care and all of these things that are really just surface level. And in fact, they're not just surface level. They're kind of toxic, because it's these like quick fixes that are really just throwing a Band-Aid on the problem and forcing you to stay in that kind of vortex or that cycle of surviving.
Yeah.
Right? On the hamster wheel. And I think this is where some deeper like self-reflection is really required. Yeah. Because you just mentioned misalignment and figuring out how to align it. And, I like to think about this as finding a way to make your 9 to 5 or your job, whatever you want to call it. For a lot of people, it's 8 to 6, 8 to 7, It definitely was for me. Oh my God, I had my work knew no bounds. It really knew no bounds. Oh my God. So yeah, how do you make your job work for you rather than you working for your job? It's like, at the end of the day, do you own your career or does your career own you? Right? And that can be said about anything. Like, you own your closet, or does your closet own you? If you're buying all of those fucking Aritzia clothes and designer clothes on a credit card that you are still paying off interest, your clothes own you.
Yep.
So do you own your career or does your career own you? That's a big question. Probably a good question to reflect on. Start to go inward and figure out, for example, a really like easy and important exercise to do is to get clear on your core values. And what are your core values? A lot of people don't know what their core values are. They think they know. Like, oh, I value freedom and creativity and open communication. Like, do you really? Have you actually like gone inward to see what's actually important to you? And I think what a lot of people get twisted with values is they think that they need to be altruistic. Fuck altruism, okay? There is a time and place for altruism. But when we're talking about what is important to you, this is actually your opportunity to get selfish. What do you want? How do you want your work to like make you feel? Where do you want to be in 5 years? You, not where does the world want you to be or where do you think you should be? What do you actually want? And like this question was like the pickle of my 20s because I always actually knew what I wanted. It kept coming up. And I just believed that what I wanted was ridiculous and not within the bounds of reality. I wanted to do yoga every day, to live on a beach, and to coach full time. I don't live on a beach, but I do yoga every day and I coach full time. So I'm like 70% of the way there. So it's like I was so scared to admit that because it was so different from the linear path that I'd been told to be satisfied with. So I think to answer your question, to shift from surviving to thriving in your 9 to 5, it's really about doing the inner excavation. What's important to you? What do you want? What is your bigger vision? Allowing yourself to get a little bit like delusional, because really probably delusion to you right now is not that delusional. It's totally within like the realm of possibility. And it's really just the limiting beliefs that we pick up through our life that like you have basically what I'm saying is if you're listening to this right now, you know what you want. You have a deeper desire. You probably have a bigger vision on your heart. This is not about figuring out what it is. It's already within you. You already know what it is. It's like, so bear with me. This is the story of a golden Buddha statue. Okay. Some people might have heard this. If you haven't, it's such a cool story. It's not a story. It's actually part of history. It's real. So in Thailand, in the 1950s, there was a group of monks that were tasked with moving this big old Buddha statue that was just like, it was a big clay Buddha statue. Wasn't really important. It had just been left out in the open for like hundreds of years. It was still seen as sacred because it was built in like the 14th century or something like that. Really, really old statue, but it wasn't really that important because it didn't look very valuable. And they were moving the statue into a monastery. And so, or into a temple or something. They go to pick up the statue. It's really heavy. It's about 10 feet tall. It's really heavy. And they're using pulleys and everything to lift it up off of its platform. And in all of that effort, the statue ends up like falling over. And it falls over. It's obviously really heavy and it cracks. And one of the monks goes in to look at the cracks and realizes like, there's gold under this. What is this? And so they start chipping away at the clay exterior. And what was inside this clay covering the whole time was this like 5.5 ton pure gold Buddha statue. And the history of this is that, and there's obviously a deeper meaning here, but I forget what century it was. There was a Burmese invasion. This is in Bangkok, by the way, in Bangkok, Thailand. There's a Burmese invasion. And this Buddha statue, which was pure gold and, being revered by monks, were aware of this invasion. And the Burmese were infamous for any of the countries that they would invade. They would find all the gold and they would melt it. And so the monks obviously didn't want that to happen to this very sacred statue. And so they covered it up. They covered it up with clay and bits of broken glass. And so when the Burmese came through and every single monk in that monastery was wiped out, really like violent invasion, they looked at this Buddha statue and they're like, okay, like whatever.
Yeah,
it's just clay.
no
It's
good.
clay. It's not, yeah, exactly. No good. And it sat there. And because all of the monks were wiped out, no one was around to actually unveil the gold underneath it. So it stood there for hundreds of years and no one knew it was on the inside. And so the deeper meaning of why I'm sharing this story is that within each of us is a pure gold essence. And as this was like on pure display when we were children, right?
Yeah.
Like little kids, just like radiant beings in our original essence. And then as we experience life, we take on a lot of conditioning and limiting beliefs. And basically that's the clay that's going on top of the gold, right? To kind of hide our inner essence. And there's two like reasons for that. You know, one that's often overlooked is we're actually protecting our inner essence from the harshness of the world around us. Because at the end of the day, our prefrontal cortex, our brain is not even fully developed until we're 25, 26 years old. So there is a protective element, but there's also an inevitable, like we just pick up so much shit, so much dirt, so much clay. And as this happens, our pure inner gold is really covered up. And so it really is up to us to do the excavation, to like peel away those pieces of gold or those pieces of clay rather, to unveil like that core essence.
Yeah.
And that's what inner work is about. And when you and I were in sales, burning ourselves out for someone else's mission to hit someone else's targets, we were like looking for all of the answers outside of ourselves. We were looking for validation outside of ourselves when really, in reality, we have pure gold inside of us. But we're looking for like hitting targets and big bonuses. And we're thinking, this is going to make me happy. We keep looking outside of ourselves when the real wealth and the real gold is within. So that's to me like a beautiful analogy for the inner work, in that all of the answers are within you. You know what you want. You have a gift. Sales is an incredible lucrative opportunity to be a human, add value. Like in selling, it's all about adding value.
Yeah.
Really. If you can come from that place of like, I'm going to figure out how this works for myself. I'm going to show up as myself and I want to be of service. Sales can be an incredibly lucrative like stepping stone. And for some people, a long-term career. As long as it is anchored in that, like, as long as you have that level of self-worth. If you're always looking for more because you think that that's going to make you feel better and it's going to mean something about you, you've got it twisted and you've got it backwards and you're going to burn out. And sales is never going to make you happy and it's not going to be a good career choice for you. But if you can do the inner work and make sales work for you and you have a bigger vision, even if that bigger vision is doing yoga on a beach every day, then all of a sudden every deal you close is in service of that something bigger.
And it's relevant for any role that you're in life.
100%.
Like if you don't clear out that shit that's all covered all over you, that's just like accumulated throughout your life, you're never going to feel as happy and fulfilled and just like overall content with where you're at in life. Like just that feeling of ease that comes once you've done some of the work to get rid of it. I know that I'm not a fully, completely cleaned off golden guy yet, but there is a feeling of ease that comes to life once you've gotten to that place. Because you have an understanding of like the bigger picture and what actually matters to you.
Yeah. And it becomes even more powerful when your bigger vision has its own bigger vision. Like, if you can picture your bigger vision, and then you can be like, okay, How is this making the world a better place? And there's always a way to spin it. When you are in like when you are fully fulfilled and satisfied and you're feeling abundant, then you're probably in a position to help others. Maybe when you're making a shit ton of money by being yourself, you start a charity or you go and you volunteer somewhere for a month every year. It doesn't have to be like anything massive, but it
Yeah.
does need to be connected to something bigger. So it's like there's kind of two sides to the coin. Number one, you have to be selfish. You do have to know what you want because that's the thing that's going to fill your cup enough for you to show up for the world. So the other
Yeah.
side of the coin is how are you going to show up for the world? What
Mm.
is your mark? What is the impact that you're here to have? And a lot of people think that in sales they can't have impact, and I don't buy that.
No.
No, I don't buy that.
I think that you can have an impact in literally any job.
Literally any job. Totally agree. You just need to be connected to your core values and to your bigger vision.
Yeah.
And, a lot of people are not willing to do that because they're afraid of one of two things. Number one, they're afraid that their vision is going to be ridiculed.
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
again, fear of other people's opinions.
Yep.
Number two, they're afraid of the truth that the life that they are currently in is going to be so different from what they
Yeah.
actually want, and actually like being aware of that, it can be scary, right? Like,
Yeah.
well, shit, I have to make some changes.
Yeah.
But the good news is that changes happen, like big changes happen as a result of small steps every single day. You don't need to quit your job to like
No.
be on purpose or find your mission and your vision. No. Small aligned steps every single day.
I love
Yeah.
that so much. Why don't we move into kind of advice portion, because that is how I like to end every single episode, is by getting you to reflect, because everyone that we've talked to so far has very different paths in how
Mhm.
they ended up where they currently are. Getting you to reflect back on your career so far and, you know, maybe revisit your younger self. Maybe it's yourself even like a few months ago. But I'm curious if you could go back in time and tell yourself something that you know now, or give your younger self, maybe it's just your earlier self in your sales career, some piece of advice. Maybe it's going all the way back to when you thought you wanted to go to med school. What would that piece of advice be? Or maybe you wouldn't even want to go back. Maybe this is how your
Mm.
journey was exactly supposed to go. But I'm curious if you could go back, what that might look like.
I do believe that all of us are on a divine path and that each of us are here for a reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I wouldn't necessarily want to change anything because I'm here, like
Yeah.
living the dream as a result of the challenges that I faced head on, knowing it was going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
So I think what I would 100% take the opportunity to go back, and what I would tell my younger self is, you're amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And your gifts are so unique and so valuable. And like, keep doing you. And like, your intuition's very strong. Listen to it. So it would be less about what she should do differently and more about like, just, I'm so grateful for you.
Yeah.
Every challenge that you have gone through and every challenge that you have yet to surmount, like,
I love that.
I'm so proud of you. Yeah.
I love that. You're the first person to say that, but just like the level of reassurance that I think a lot of ourselves need from the like older version of us, or the person who's in the position that they so long to be in eventually, is
I
just,
know.
it would be huge.
I know. It's about realizing that every situation you're in is in service of your higher self.
Yeah.
Everything is always working out for your higher self. I know that that is such a cliche thing to say, but it's true. Even the things that feel really shitty, that you might not feel like you're equipped to deal with right now, it's actually teaching you something that's going to be incredibly valuable to your journey. So it's like trusting that everything you've picked up along the way is in service of something bigger.
I appreciated you being here so much, Jess. I know that you shared a lot of wisdom with everyone just in this small episode, but I do want to like open up the floor to you just to kind of talk through what you actually do, because I think this audience would benefit a lot from the work that you do. I mentioned at the top that I do work with Jess as well, but want you to kind of explain if there is anyone listening that is like, ooh, this girl's saying some cool stuff. Maybe I am interested in what she's doing. Want you to kind of explain what that could look like.
Thanks, Cal. Yeah, I think I'll end up putting the ball in your court a little bit because we have worked together in the context of coaching. And if anything, it's probably more valuable to hear it from someone who's been through it. But yeah, in a nutshell, I've been through a couple of monikers, okay? But I really landed on the purpose coach. And the reason for that is that I really feel that my purpose in life is to connect others to their soul purpose. And this doesn't mean I'm like giving you something. It actually is me guiding you into your truth. And so I've been really called to work with women. Surprise, surprise, I am one. And like I love coaching men. I've coached men. I love coaching men. But in this season of where I'm at, I have to trust the intuitive nudge that like I'm here to serve women. So yeah, in a nutshell, I help ambitious women connect with their soul purpose and redefine success on their terms, which we talked a lot about, right? Like what's important to you. And really, once you've done that, you can connect with your bigger vision and with your soul purpose. And when you're connected to that, we do a little bit of mindset work. You have all the tools to create the life and career of your wildest dreams.
Totally.
Yeah. So that's what I do. I do work with people on a one-to-one basis. I have some like VIP one-on-one clients, but my most like my signature offering is a group coaching container, which is called Purpose Uprising. And that is the group coaching container that Kelly is in.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think there's something really special about being in a group setting because it invites you to be in community, of course, and energy is contagious. It's very helpful to be around other people who are on a similar journey. But it's very important in this type of work to open yourself to being witnessed. So not just like doing your work alone in a dark little corner. Like that's not going to do anything. And it's certainly not going to invite you into that next level of leadership. That's really going to allow you to pop up. So yeah, I'd love to give you an opportunity, Cal, to share what you've taken away from Purpose Uprising. Yeah, with a group coaching container, which typically starts at like a 4-month accelerator, and then some people choose to continue. But yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Yes, I don't even know where to begin because I think my entire life has changed since we started working together.
Good, because that's what I say happens, but I think a lot of people think I'm exaggerating.
I'm like, I also don't want to say that to people and scare people away because it's actually all really positive changes. So I've ended up moving back to my hometown just to like figure out where I actually want to be and what I want my life to look like long term. I changed career paths. I got the confidence to quit my job and start my own business. I started this podcast. So there's like those things that have changed. There's also the internal things that have changed. So like shifted in understanding what's more important to me, even like with my moving back to my hometown, I spend so much more time with my parents than I ever have before, which I think does go a lot to some of the inner work that I've done and understanding what I actually value in life. So like shifts like that happening. And then the group portion of it, I am in a group with 2 other women right now. And I would say that they've become like some of my closest friends in a way.
Mm.
Like it is in a coaching container in that capacity, but they're like two of my biggest cheerleaders in a lot of
Mm.
ways, and
Mhm.
also people that I can go to for advice and opinions on things that are in they're in very different places in life than me because we're just on our own paths, but are very similar in some ways because of the fact that we're all doing this work at the same time. So, a lot of
Mhm.
actual changes in my life in terms of where I physically live, what I do, a lot of
Mhm.
changes to my mental like well-being of where I'm spending my energy and time and even what my thoughts are, and then community and new
Mm.
little friends that I can trust and build build with, I guess. Like
Mm.
they're a big part of me building out everything that I'm working on right now. And then of course, I have one-on-ones with Jess too, where
Mm.
it's essentially just like this podcast.
Thank you so much for sharing that experience, Cal, because it means a lot to me to hear that reflected back as well. But it has truly been such an honor to witness you on this journey and to witness the transformation. Even what you said about the obvious things in your external environment, right? Our mind loves like looking at surface level, like metrics and things that are, but really the things that change in our outer environment's just a reflection of what's happening on the inside.
Totally.
So, you know, if you're experiencing big shifts on the inside, it inevitably is reflected back to you in big shifts in your 3D reality. And often those
Yeah.
shifts are like material, and it's
Mhm.
bringing in material wealth in a lot of cases. So, this is why whenever you have like an urge to purge your closet, usually that's a sign that there's something shifting on the inside as well. So, just a little tidbit for people listening, because I know we women and the closet purge. I think that's a universal thing.
It happens to me so much. Even right now, I want to do it again, and I just did it in January. So,
Yeah. Yeah. I know. And that's the other thing is when you do this work in community, it does really accelerate. It accelerates it. Because the
yeah,
truth of the matter is, you could have done this work on your own, but it would have been likely over a period of 5 to 10 years.
yeah,
And when you put yourself in rooms and containers like this, and you're actually betting on yourself, people don't realize it really accelerates the timeline. Yeah, this is really why I'm so passionate about this work, because even in you having this podcast, you're inspiring so many people. And the ripple effect that you are having in starting your own thing and being unapologetically yourself and showing up on TikTok the way that you do, like this is truly how you make the world a better place. It's how each of us makes the world a better place. It's showing up in your authenticity, in your power,
yeah.
and being willing to make mistakes, because mistakes are how we learn. So thank you so much for sharing that.
I love everything that you just said, but it made me think of also like I think the biggest thing that's changed for me is just not caring what other people think anymore.
What was your biggest, I don't know, takeaway, aha moment from this conversation? I always like to end with the key takeaway.
So much, but I think that the main one is if you do have a sense of your core values, understanding of what you actually want in life, your success, your 9 to 5 life, all of that can thrive as well. Like they don't have to exist separately, which I think is something that's a really common misconception of like, if
Mhm.
I do all of this inner work, then I'm going to find out that I hate my 9 to 5 and not be able to do that anymore, not be able to thrive in that environment where like those two things can actually coexist and go beautifully together.
Yeah, I love that. I think my biggest takeaway, I think it's when you were describing how you ended up going from SDR to AE, and we really talked about how the story of, but how do I become this or whatever, that the root of it really was anchored in like self-worth. And we talked about getting to the core. I think that was really interesting.
Totally.
Yeah, and given that's your key takeaway, I think I have a master class in my archives called What You Really, Really Want.
Mm.
And it does support, it supports getting clear on the vision. There's also a higher self visualization, which is super powerful. But we can drop the link to get the replay in the show notes. That might be something that your
Yes.
listeners can get value from.
There will be so many links in the show notes to like human design because I think everyone needs to do that after this episode.
I know.
And just like in general, all the places to find Jess on the internet.
Thanks, Cal. This was so fun. Thank you for setting this up.
Yes,
I have
thank
so much
you.
love for you and so much love for everyone who tuned in to listen. Like, if you're still
Likewise.
here listening to our rambling conversation, I love you. Thank you.
All right, so that is a wrap on this week's episode. As always, there will be links to connect with Jess in the description of the podcast if you are interested in exploring her offerings or working with her in one capacity or another. Please check her out. Okay, editing Kelly jumping in quickly here to say, if you are interested in working with Jess in any capacity, when you reach out to her, include her mentor in the subject line, or just make sure that her mentor is mentioned to her, and you will qualify for $150 off of any service. So want to make sure that that is known. I will have all of her contact info as well as all of those links that we mentioned in the description. Okay, bye from me. Back to normal me. So we'll be here same time next week. So if you are really great at remembering things, come on back. But if you need a little reminder, feel free to click follow on Spotify so that you will see anytime that we post a new episode. Also, if you are enjoying the podcast and would like to, please leave us a rating. It helps us reach a wider audience when we have a higher rating and lots of those 5-star ratings. Thank you, and I will see you next week.